Hey, what's up? It's TJ here, and today we're going to talk about the 8 things that you need to do before you press record. And honestly, I've done this so many times before. Well, I've messed this up so many times before. And normally you'll have somebody on the shoot with you to help you check these things off the list. But if you're like me and you don't have anybody to shoot with, or you shoot, interviews and things like that pretty often by yourself, and then you're going to want to do this, and you're going to want to do this in this order. First things first is you want to format your cards. Honestly, you should do this the day before. You should do this before you even go out to the shoot. Have your memory cards or SD cards picked out before you even go to the shoot and know which cards you're going to use. You might even want to put them in the camera and have them formatted and ready to go. Sometimes on weddings, I do this all the time, is I will have the cards in the cameras ready to go and format it before I even arrive to the shoot. That way I'm prepared. But if you don't do this, if you do show up and you have to pick out your cards there, put them in your camera and then make sure that they are formatted. Make sure that they don't have any other footage on there. That way you have enough space to shoot what you're about to shoot. You don't want to get halfway through an interview and then you have to say, hey, sorry, I gotta change my cards. The second thing you want to do is to check your level, composition, and framing. Once you've placed your camera on whatever you're going to shoot on, whether it's a tripod or a gimbal or even a drone, you want to make sure that you have a level camera. You want to make sure that your shot and your framing is level and not tilted or just off axis at all. You also want to make sure that there's nothing in the shot that is not supposed to be in the shot. Make sure you get that out of the shot and frame it properly. This is going to cause you to have to crop and scale up the image in post, which may alter or change your resolution. And this is the point where you want to make sure that you know what you're shooting for. If you're shooting for widescreen, you want to make sure that the image that you want in widescreen fits in that widescreen. So just check it, double check it in camera so you don't have to do that editing in post. So now for the resolution and framing. This is the point where you want to check to make sure that you are shooting what you want to shoot. If you want to shoot in 4K, if you want to shoot in 1080, if you want to shoot in 4K, if you want to shoot in 1080, you want to make sure that those are set. This is important because sometimes if you're shooting an A cam and a B cam, you want to make sure that your settings are the same on both. You want to make sure that both of them are running 4K or both of them are running 1080. And then you also want to make sure that it's shooting in the frame rate that you want to shoot in. Are you shooting slow motion at 60 frames per second, or are you shooting at 24 frames per second? Just make sure that both cameras or your main camera is set to what you want it to be set at. Now the next thing to do is to set your shutter speed. You want to make sure that your shutter speed is, of course, double your frame rate. So if you're shooting at 24 frames per second, you want to make sure that your shutter speed is set to 50 or 48 if you can get that. And if you are shooting at 60 frames per second, you want to make sure that your shutter speed is set to 120. Again, check to make sure that both cameras are set to the same thing, because you don't want to have an incident with this. This sounds super simple, but some shoots may require you to change from 24 frames per second to 60 frames per second and then back to 24. And when you change back to 24, you may have left your shutter speed at 120, and you don't want to do this. So every time you change, you want to make sure that you double check your shutter speed and make sure that both cameras are operating on the same shutter speed and frame rate. Okay, now it's time to check your white balance. And I typically set my white balance to Kelvin. And the reason why I do this, especially on shoots like interviews or just any type of shoots that require multiple cameras, or even where I am lighting it myself, or it's not just a run and gun style shoot. But you definitely don't want to use auto white balance, especially if you're using multiple cameras, because just a slight angle change can actually change the white balance or change what the camera is reading. So if I'm shooting at 5600 Kelvin, then I want to make sure my B cam is also shooting at 5600 Kelvin. Now it's time to check your aperture and your focus. So I like to set my aperture to make sure that I keep my subject in focus, but also give me the depth that I'm looking for. This is a combination of me making sure I choose the right lenses, but also making sure that I choose the right aperture. And at this point, I like to check the focus to make sure that the focus is proper and as sharp as possible. So I may go up on my aperture to make sure that I have the subject in focus. So if I'm shooting multiple people or 2 people side by side, or maybe even 3 people side by side, make sure that I capture all of those people in focus. Also, if a subject is moving forward and backwards, I want to make sure that my depth of field is wide enough to capture them whether they move backwards or whether they move forward. This is where a monitor will come in handy because you can see the image a lot larger and make sure that things are in focus, and also focus peaking and other little tools like that can help you get that in focus. So this is the point where I like to tell my subject to be mindful of their motion. I can tell them to move forward, move backward, and just tell them, hey, this is your zone. Like, don't move outside of the zone. That way they are, they understand where they can move and where they can't move, because they may think, oh yeah, I can just move where I want to move. I can just talk however I want to talk. And until you actually tell them, hey, this is where I want you to stay at, because if you move outside of the zone, you'll be out of focus. So just be mindful of that. And most of the time people kind of abide by that and they understand, okay, I'll just stay right here. But I check this at least twice. So I will set the focus and then I will turn off focus peaking and then look at it on the monitor and make sure it's set. And then I'll turn focus peaking back on, and I may adjust it a little bit just to double check that it's in focus. For most scenarios, I don't like the camera to use autofocus because I just don't trust autofocus to just do what it's supposed to do all the time. There may be some scenarios where it just, it goes out of whack, or it just doesn't do what I want it to do. So I like to handle it myself. Now it's time to test the audio and make sure that the audio is set. So you want to spend a little bit of time with the camera and make sure the camera is all set, and then you want to switch over to audio. If you're doing this alone, this can be hard, but if you separate the two tasks and make sure you do the first things first and then do the audio, then you will be just fine. Now that your camera is set, you may have a little bit of extra frame to move the audio down and further towards the subject to make sure you get a cleaner, crisp audio. So at this point, put your headphones on and make sure that the audio is good. Listen for noise, listen for ambient sounds, listen for anything you can hear that may ruin your audio, and then tell your subject, hey, look, can you talk loudly? Can you speak softly? Or just hold a conversation with them to allow yourself to adjust and capture the levels. Now that your audio is set, you can now press record on your audio. Make sure the audio is rolling before you start rolling the camera. A lot of times you may hit record on the camera and completely forget about the audio because you're focused in on the shot and saying action and looking at the frame and making sure everything is good on the frame. The audio needs to start rolling first, just so you can make sure that it's out the way and that it's rolling. So just press record on the audio and then press record on your camera. That way you don't forget about the audio and the audio is good. I messed this up so many times before, and mostly in talking videos like this where I sit down and I start talking and you end up talking for 20 minutes and then you have to do it all over again because you didn't press record on your recorder. You don't want this problem, so audio first and then the camera speeds. I hope this helped. Let me know in the comments below, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.